cue with the story. The president has been tweeting. He writes this morning. Look how things have turned around on the criminal deep state. He calls it the criminal deep state. They go after phony collusion with Russia, a made-up scam, and end up getting caught in a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may have never seen before.
Dear
what
God.
goes around comes around. And Joe, he finishes by saying, in all caps, Spygate, he's calling it. Spygate could be one of the biggest political scandals in history.
Yeah, Willie, I don't really know where to begin. Spygate? I mean, you have a guy that Donald Trump says is running his foreign policy, getting drunk and talking to the Australian ambassador and bragging about contacts with the Russians. And the FBI is tipped off by the Australian ambassador, and they start moving forward. And Heidi, again, Donald Trump, there are still people who actually can think clearly in this country. And for those who can, it's very obvious that Robert Mueller is getting closer and closer and closer to something that scares the ever-living hell out of Donald Trump. And now he is apparently responding today to a plea deal by the taxi king yesterday that is going to take down his fixer. And Donald Trump, obviously, now unbelievably fearful that it's going to take him down as well.
Well, you look at this tweet, Joe, and I think the reaction on Capitol Hill is going to be that this confirms their worst fears, that even though Rosenstein's calculation may be to try and put this all off, try to protect the investigation, that the president is interpreting these moves, allowing an investigation, allowing the Republicans to come in and view these Department of Justice documents as a caving. I spoke last night with Senator Blumenthal, who is trying to do something on Capitol Hill to protect both Mueller and now Rosenstein. And he's telling me that there is a lot of apprehension behind the scenes by the Republicans who he's trying to work with, that in fact the president does have Rosenstein more in his sights. We saw that yesterday, Joe, when the president was point blank asked in the Oval Office whether he has confidence in Rosenstein, and he pointedly refused to answer. So Senator Blumenthal tells me that behind the scenes it is getting harder and harder, even for these Republicans, to deny that the president doesn't somehow have Rosenstein as well as Mueller in his sights. And the senator told me, look, every time we go into one of these breaks, we're going to have another one next week. We carry that apprehension, and yet Senator Blumenthal cannot get these Republicans to join him on legislation to try and stand up to the president, or at least send a signal to the president. They know in the end the president himself would have to sign the legislation, but to at least show that they are not going to just roll over in the worst case scenario, and we do see something akin to a Saturday night massacre.
So, David Ignatius, we need to stop here as the president is now this morning building this narrative about what he calls a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may never have seen before, labeling it Spygate, and talk about what the FBI actually did in 2016, the distinction between spies and informants. Can you lay that out a little bit for our audience?
So, during the spring and summer of 2016, from what we know, the FBI began to get reports that people who were associated with the Trump campaign had been talking about their contacts with Russia in a way that concerned FBI and U.S. intelligence officials as they began to get these reports from various ways. The most famous contact is the one that George Papadopoulos, a Trump foreign policy advisor, his comments to the Australian ambassador in London, Alexander Downer. And the FBI became concerned enough that it wanted to know what was behind these rumors, and so people who have been informants, assets, one in particular, an American professor, ex-professor in England, began to track those down. That is what our intelligence agencies do. That's their job. Had they ignored this, they would be, I think, could be accused of being derelict. it's crucial to note, as Joe did earlier in the previous segment, that the FBI said nothing about what it was doing publicly, that this information was carefully held and suppressed, but it was part of their normal counterintelligence function. What we've seen over the last, I'd say, 6 months is that the Trump counterpunch to the Mueller investigation is to add each of these extraneous details. There was a focus on Chris Steele, the former MI6 agent in Britain, and his role, and that was made to seem nefarious. Then there was a focus on the American investigator, Glenn Simpson, and his role with GPS fusion. Now the focus is on this American professor in England, all trying to make it sound like it's something conspiratorial against Trump, it's un-American, and there's really no evidence that I see to support that.